Welcome to This Way Up. We are bringing you engaging, informative, and inspiring conversations surrounding all aspects of mental health from the perspective of us as parents and caregivers. I'm Andrea Nanigian.
And I'm Emmy Waters. When someone you care about is struggling with their mental health, this can be an incredibly stressful and challenging time. So we're here to provide valuable resources to support you as you navigate this journey.
Emmy, today's guest, Seren, was so much fun to talk to.
She was. I can't wait for everybody to hear from a licensed professional counselor in Colorado, somebody who speaks with such authenticity, humor, honesty, and I just hope everyone enjoys this and stay all the way to the end because she's going to give a lot of insight, a lot of laughs, being both a school counselor and running a private practice and being a mother of 2 young kids.
Yeah.
And she lets us all off the hook at the very end. So I hope you all enjoy this one. We are thrilled to have our lovely guest today, Seren Waldman, who is a licensed professional counselor in Colorado. She's been working with families and individuals in her private practice and in a school setting for almost 10 years. She's currently working in a K through 12 private school through the Jewish Family Services in Colorado. In her private practice, she works with adolescents and young adults, families, and parents. Her techniques come from a strength-based systemic approach, including structural family therapy tailored to the client's developmental level. Her goal is to create a safe environment for the therapeutic process. Seren, thanks for being here with Andrea and I. We really are excited for this conversation.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Thank you, Seren. K through 12, that is a big delta in ages there. What are some of I would imagine though you see some common themes throughout the mental health struggles. What are some of the common things that you're seeing and that you're treating kids on a day-to-day basis for at the school?
I would say anxiety is probably the top of the list. Anxiety or depression. ADHD often comes with either anxiety or depression or both. Sometimes there's a major comorbidity there. A lot of emotional regulation. I would say that right after COVID, I was seeing a lot of struggles with social skills, even with middle school students who just had been online for a long time and just not even necessarily online. Because at my school, we were actually in person that whole year. We closed in March of 2020, but then that September, but that August, we came back full time. I think we had to close maybe once or twice, but we were in person, but kids were very isolated.
Yeah.
Even with us being they had to sit a certain, distance apart. And we did have some kids whose parents pulled them out during COVID and then have since come back. And those are the ones who have had the most problems with social skills.
Is it a certain age range that you see that more commonly with?
The middle school age and early high school, I would say, because a lot of them really struggled towards the end of middle school. My cousin's son is a freshman in high school. And when he started back in 7th grade, he and a lot of his peers were really struggling. And she couldn't figure out kind of what was going on. And I was like, he literally, the last time he was in person was in 5th grade.
Oh my gosh.
He missed an entire year of social development just because he had to be online for the most part. So these teachers had this incoming class of 7th graders expecting them to act as 7th graders, but really what they were getting was a class of 5th graders.
It's an interesting perspective.
From an emotional perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of teachers had a really hard time that year after everyone kind of came back. But so back to your question though, I would say anxiety and depression are probably the biggest things. Social anxiety, emotional regulation, those are probably the biggest things that I see. And ADHD.
As kids are transitioning from high school, graduating and moving on, I would imagine that that's a pretty delicate time in your relationship. How are you preparing those kids to continue that self-care and to move past, especially if they've only been getting it through the school?
Yeah, we really talk a lot about that as the school year is coming to an end. So at the school I'm at, not all of our seniors do this, but it is the norm that they will go to Israel and do a gap year and they'll study in Israel for a year. But we do talk a lot about like, yeah, so what are the supports at the place you're going to be at in Israel? Like, how can you, like, we would do a lot of reviewing of like the coping skills that we've talked about and what are the things, how can you help yourself if you are going downhill? What do you notice about yourself when your anxiety is starting to ramp up? What are you noticing inside of you to help you get yourself help before it gets to a really critical point where you're really struggling? I think that's an issue across the board.
It is, yeah.
I don't think our teenagers are going off, whether they're going to college or whatever they're doing, they leave high school and I don't think they're prepared enough in a lot of ways to go out into the world.
Right.
You bring up a really good point. Actually, I don't think we've ever talked about this before, but that is a big transition in and of itself, kid leaving high school and all the systems they have in place, including counseling and other support systems. But for the parents to feel like their kid is going to be okay, are they going to be able to advocate for themselves? If they need help, are they going to be able to find someone? That was really scary, you know? It is scary at the parent because you're not sure.
I can imagine.
Well, you're already unsure of so many things. A kid launching, are they going to be okay out in the world independent of me and our family environment? But if they have any kind of mental health struggle, certainly, let's just even say anxiety, I remember that being really scary. Like, is my child going to know how to find some help? Are they going to be able to advocate for themselves? Because as the parent of somebody who went through therapy and I could interact with the therapist, I felt really comfortable if I had my 5 minutes in the beginning or end to kind of get a summary or give a summary. And now, transitioning them off, you're like, oh my gosh, I hope I worked myself out of a job. I hope their therapists worked themselves out of a job and they're going to be okay.
The reason I brought it up was because my son, who's almost 21, we didn't know when he went off to university that they had any of these resources in place. We figured, okay, he's done with a 504 and luckily he had a strong relationship with his psychologist. So he's taking that. But then my daughter went to a charter school and the charter school came to us at the end of the year and said, okay, the state of California has Department of Rehabilitation that we're going to set you up with. And the college has this, that, and the other. And they handed us this packet basically of information and, to get her transitioned, which I didn't realize was available to all students and at all universities. So the
transitioning packet or the services?
The services, and I say packet, it really wasn't a packet. It was like a whole system. I mean, it was like they were holding our hands to get us there. But, I just didn't realize that there were those type of services in the college age level as much as they have.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think then that's on your son's school and shame on them for not letting you know that, right? Because like if a kid has a 504 and has an accommodation plan in high school, then they can have those same accommodations in college. If you have extended time for tests in high school with the correct documentation, I mean, you have to seek it out, right? Like you have but like, I want to go back just for a second. I mean, like what you were saying about like hoping that your kid like knows how to get their help.
Yeah.
The one thing that I struggle with in our like society is just that this mentality of, okay, they're 18, they've graduated college, they're adults now, like they can just figure it all out.
Yeah.
An 18-year-old boy has a good decade left of brain development.
Oh,
so, like,
yeah.
when they leave high school and go to college, yes, they are on their own. Yes, they are like legally an adult, but they are still kids and they still really need adult help. Not in the same way that they did when they were 10, but like I think our job as parents, I mean, look, my kids are younger than yours, but like, I mean, I rely on my mom for a lot of things all the time. I'm 42. Like our job as parents is never over. And I just think that we've built a society where like people like just are like, okay, well they're out of the house. Like, yes, I'm still the parent, but like they can figure it out. And I think that's setting kids up for failure. And then on the same token, like we also need to help these kids in now are so afraid of failure because parents are jumping in at the drop of a hat to save them, that when they get to college, that's when they're really struggling because they have no idea what the fuck is going on because their parents aren't there to call their professor and like convince them to give them more time on a paper or whatever. Like it's a very like interesting extreme.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that makes sense.
No,
What I
yeah.
was just
And
saying.
you had a really valid point about that fear of failure and us rescuing our kids too often.
It's impossible not to. I mean, as a parent, it's so hard not to want to protect your kid
Yeah.
and to let them fail. But the best thing we can do as parents or as therapists or as, you know, people who work in a school or people who work with kids is to let them fail and let them learn how to be okay with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How do you think we got here?
I don't know. I think it's been like a gradual like increase over decades, probably. Like I was actually just reading an article today, a New York Times article about like the best way to help kids with their anxiety and their mental health struggles is like to kind of lean into it, like to encourage them to fail, like to help them understand, like you want to do really. The article like gave an example of like this kid who like couldn't sleep in his own room by himself. So instead of the therapist using like a CBT model, he was like, "What kind of amazing things do you wish you could do? What do you want to do with your life? And what do you wish you could do?" And like, let's say it's like walk the dog by myself. So then the therapist is like working with the parents to let the kid walk the dog by himself, right? And get right. But like I think partly where we got here is that parents are so scared. We are so
True.
scared because there's so much scary stuff in the world. And there is. But like when we were all kids, the scary stuff was still there. We just didn't hear about it as often. Right.
Yeah.
And so the more we hear because of the constant news cycle and internet and phones and everything, I think parents are so terrified that something bad is going to happen to their kid that they just don't let their kids do anything at all. And so then we have these kids with so much anxiety because their parents have never let them walk to their friend's house by themselves.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy? Mm-hmm. That is crazy. I think that it's definitely that fear that something bad will happen. And parallel to that, we just can't bear our kids suffering at all. It's horrible. Whereas the generation ahead of us, I don't think that they were that pained by, our hardships. And speaking of hardships, remember, Andrea, I was telling you about this article that I've been holding on to for over a decade about kind of what Seren was saying about letting your kid experience discomfort and maybe some hardship and suffering. And it was such an impactful talk because I at the time, my oldest child was 6 and it was, everything in our house was padded. And, I probably wasn't letting her ride her bike 3 blocks away. Shame on me. But he said, if your child does not have any hardship, then it is your job as a parent to artificially inject hardship, make something up. And he gave some really concrete examples, but I did learn that early on that was really important. And my kids did run into some organic hardship, so I didn't have to make stuff up.
Well, the thing that I was just thinking about is that failure could also be a failure in perception.
True. Yeah.
I think our world these days is all about how does everything look? Mm-hmm. How can I make my 3-year-old's birthday party the best birthday party? How can I have the sign, my sophomore son is going to have the best sign to ask his girlfriend to homecoming?
Yeah, that's true.
So I can post it on Instagram and everyone thinks I have this perfect life. Yep.
Right. And then that sets them up for when they don't have that, what happens? Or what happens when his girl that he asks to the homecoming is now put on the spot with all these cameras and everything? She doesn't want to say no. I mean, she wants to say no, but she doesn't want to say no to him because she knows she's going to humiliate him. So then she's like, well, I guess I have to say yes. But it's just all of this perception it's got to be taking its toll on how kids are reacting to everyday situations where, somebody asked us to homecoming, we said no. It was like maybe us and 6 other people that really knew that, it wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
That's such a good point.
There's so much exposure. We're exposed to so much information. The kids are, definitely exposing themselves in different ways out there.
We're inundated with it.
Yeah.
It's exhausting.
The question is how is that trajectory going to change? I don't see it changing.
I actually think it is, because what I'm kind of seeing and hearing is that, so when like social media and cell phones and all this stuff really came out, right? Us as the adults, we were so into it, right? So like, and we didn't know what the negative impacts were
That's
going to
true.
be on anyone, right? So like, obviously I didn't have kids at that point, but like, so I think parents didn't know any better. So they just had no boundaries for the most part with it, right? So we have this generation of kids who just like just had all at their fingertips all the time. But then, so we were at this like major one end of the extreme, but I kind of see it kind of swinging back towards the middle, because now we know we have the information, and even teens themselves are taking themselves off of social media, because teens themselves are under recognizing, I'll look up from my phone and realize I've spent 2 hours scrolling and I don't feel good about it. Right. And
Yeah.
so I think that we're like, the pendulum is kind of going to swing back, and hopefully we don't go back to this other extreme where like it's like banned and like, shame on you for for having any social media or whatever, but kind of come to middle. So I think that, look, it's not going anywhere. Our kids don't know a world without any of this.
Right.
So I think that as we all learn more, I think that the pendulum will continue to swing back to like a more of a middle ground, because we've learned from like the past mistakes.
Yeah. So that means, Andrea, your kids and my kids were like the beta test generation.
I know. We've talked about that. Remember? We've talked about that, Emmy.
It's terrible. I feel horrible.
But, I think, Seren, you bring up a good point, is that the question, I think, as parents, we can be even asking ourselves and asking our kids is, how do I feel when I get done scrolling through Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, whatever? What is that gut feeling? And at least that's a point to at least start the discussion with.
Yeah. And, we all know like kids, like they might fight it, but at the end of the day, kids want to have boundaries.
Yeah.
Like they thrive when they have boundaries and parameters set. And so I would say for parents who are like, whose kids are maybe in between our kids' ages, right? Who are that like late middle school into high school, having that conversation with them of like, we want you to, we recognize that like this is the norm and all your friends have social media or whatever, but like we also want you to have like a healthy balance. So like maybe working with the teen to come up with that as if age appropriate. Is that appropriate for a 13-year-old? No, I don't think so. A 13-year-old still needs a lot of boundaries. So like you set those boundaries as the parent. That's our job. And that can change as you get older. But I think we have to teach our kids how to moderate that. But it also starts with us modeling that behavior. And
Exactly.
It's hard, right? Because I think adults are the ones who are almost more addicted. Like there's so much talk about teens and how addicted they are to their phones. And they are. I see it. I mean, you walk through our building at lunchtime and the majority of the kids are doing this, right? And sometimes they're even texting each other. They're like 3 feet away from one another and they're fucking texting each other. I'm like, put your phones away. Like talk, look at each other, talk to one another. But we all do it. And so some of it is like our own, like it's on us to also model that, be like putting our phones down and being more present.
That's true. Can I ask, do you have a plan for what age your kids will have a phone or what age they'll be able to use social media?
I mean, 8th grade at the earliest.
Yeah. Okay.
If it gets to the point where whatever reason, like they need to have a phone to contact, like they need to have a way to contact us, then we'll cross that bridge. But like you can also get phones that you literally can only call and text.
True.
I am fine with that. It is a hard balance because you don't want your kid to be so out of touch, right? That it impacts them socially.
Right.
But you also don't want your kids, why do we want our kids to be exposed to all of this stuff? Every once in a while I'll let them watch this one YouTuber who they like, but like YouTube is not on their iPads. I've watched it on the computer. They have very little access to that. And we'll keep it like that as long as we possibly can.
Yeah. I wish I could go back and do it differently, to be honest.
How would you have done it differently?
I think I would have had stricter rules. I mean, my kids were middle school when Snapchat just was a thing. So I didn't know what it was, So when they're saying, can I Snapchat my friend? And it just seemed like a thing where you make silly faces together. Same with Instagram. We didn't know what Instagram was when they were all starting to, post pictures. So they were very much like the beta test group. And I think I absolutely would have squashed that. But by the time my youngest came around, I knew better. So I said, no, you're not doing this till later. But my olders, yeah.
Well, interesting. My daughter, when she was in 7th grade, her class, she was at a private school, and her class, the teacher started an Instagram page for the class, and the kids had to be on it. So I was like, oh, and
Really?
Yeah. Now that was 6 years ago. So it was a long time ago. But again, you're like, now I look back and I think that, started something. I didn't really necessarily want her on Instagram, but once she was there and I followed her and, all that stuff, but still it's like, it just starts a trend that you don't need.
Totally. Well, and we are all informed. We all like to think, I'm sure, like that we are informed and stuff like that. But like, there's a lot of parents who aren't, and they don't pay attention. And I think that's the hard part, right? Because like, we all have our best intentions. Who knows what social media is going to look like 5 years from now?
It's already changed so much.
And like, it could be a whole thing that we can't even imagine. Like, it would be interesting to come back and have this conversation 5 years from now and like see like what has changed and what hasn't changed. And, I think that a lot of parents are busy, and we're all busy, and I'm not always as good as I probably need to be about like looking at what my kids are looking at and watching and like monitoring, but there are parents who are completely don't pay any attention to it.
Curating these valuable conversations is really about our shared passion for promoting mental wellness. Behind the scenes, however, there are some platforms and systems we utilize that cost money that help bring these episodes to you.
If you found value in our conversations and feel inspired to support, consider making a donation. Whether it's the price of your morning cup of coffee or more, your contribution directly supports our ability to keep connecting, sharing, and growing. Please visit our website at thiswayuppodcast.com to support this community. We thank you and we appreciate you. And I think sometimes we do get all caught up in that because, back when I was a kid, my parents didn't really know what was happening at all in my life. And because that's just the way it was. Now, I didn't have the ability to be exposed to as much because there was not, we only had 5 channels or whatever. But yet I still had the freedom to get myself involved in situations that weren't healthy for me, and not that I did. I was a really good kid, just sidebar. Just in case my mom's listening to this. But I still had that opportunity to. And so I think kids will be kids. Kids are going to be exposed to things that they're going to have to learn to deal with. And that's where your morals come in, right? That's where you kind of learn and develop some of those. Okay, what should I be doing this? Oh, no, I shouldn't, but I'm going to try it for a little bit. So I think there's some developmental things that go along with that. And risks as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think that goes back to like what we were talking about earlier, just like how we've bubble wrapped our kids, and they're not like, they're just like a balance of like what your kids are exposed to and what like from a developmental standpoint. And like 13-year-olds don't need to be looking at porn, but they can see porn because everything is at their fingertips, right? And I think that's where parents and just adults in general, like that's where we're not paying enough attention of like, well, if your kid's in their room with the door shut and their iPad, who knows what the hell they're looking at?
Yeah.
Right.
And so that's and listen, yeah, I had a friend when I was in elementary school whose stepdad had Playboys, and we thought it was hilarious to like look at them. So like, yeah, you're always going to get yourself into trouble, and that's
maybe
fine.
Your mom is listening.
I'm pretty sure she knows about that. My mom.
I know.
She knows pretty much. She knows most of the things.
a few years ago, I was talking to my cousin and we were talking about porn and how easily it is available to boys on the internet and
God.
the kind of stuff that they can see. And it's just so awful. And so she and I actually came up with a business idea to come out with a mom approved porn site.
Wait.
So that it shows.
Oh my gosh.
That's amazing.
But
what the hell is this?
No.
This was not in the outline.
Oh my God. No, I need to hear more.
Continue.
Sorry. But it would be a place that would like not show like the stuff that was unhealthy. It would be like natural sweet sex that was, like it was like it was to be there to protect the boys. And then I think it was her husband that said, that's still probably illegal. So we never went through with it. But I was like, yeah, we should have this mom approved porn site. So
that is so funny. Oh my God,
yeah,
I love that.
Entrepreneurial spirit at heart.
Oh my gosh.
That is hilarious.
You learn something new every day, guys.
Wow, that's a good
I would
one.
love to see your son's face when you if you ever tell him that you had that idea at one point.
Okay, now that's
Mom, that just ruins it right there. My mom has seen all this first.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. The kids don't want to think about that.
Yeah, no. Well, yeah. That brings up a good point. But I thought it was a good idea because I thought it would be healthy, like it would be a healthy place that they could go that wouldn't be so scary.
Is that kind of like bubble wrapping the porn?
Yes.
Well, yes and no, because when boys look at porn, it's really detrimental to their development because it gives them this false idea of what sex is like and what women's bodies are like and what men's bodies are like and should be like. And there's a lot of research of that. If they watch too much of it, it can really impact them down the road when they are then becoming sexual and what they then expect and what they experience versus what they've seen and think things are like.
Right. This is really stressing me out.
Okay, and just so you guys both know, this was altruistic in my standpoint because that is exactly why I was saying we needed to have.
Yeah,
because I was like,
yeah, I can see that.
I wanted to have a place that set expectations.
You wanted to show the kids what kind of sex they should be having.
Right. It took sex ed to a whole different level.
Oh my
God. Oh my God, that is really funny.
Oh my gosh.
I don't know how we got here, you guys. I'm so sorry.
I don't get it.
So can we talk about anxiety? The anxiety that's creeping up in my soul right now, thinking about my boys watching porn. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I think that as a parent, again, my kids are younger. I think that you just don't let yourself go to that place.
Yeah. You get all the knowledge, Seren, your younger parent generation and see all the mistakes that we made.
Yeah, but then we're making mistakes that the next ones won't make. This is something I tell parents all the time, and I'm going to say this verbatim. We all fuck up our kids. It is inevitable. We are humans. We are going to make mistakes. There's no way that we don't fuck up our kids in some way. My job, therapists, the whole crew, the whole job, it wouldn't exist if we didn't fuck up our kids. It's just inevitable.
So you need us. You need us like this.
Right. You need us as therapists, right? Well, yeah, I'm probably I know I'm messing up my kids in a different way than my parents messed me up, and that's okay because it just is. Yeah, guess what? I yell at my kids. I try not to. I yell at my kids. I'm a person. Sometimes they just get me to that point. I just get to that point.
Yes. Thank you for validating loud voices.
It doesn't feel good to yell at your kids.
No.
But, we all do it. And I just think that I think so many parents are so afraid that if they yell at their kids, or that because they yell at their kids, they're messing their kids up. I'm like, well, honestly, you're probably messing them up in a way you don't even realize.
Right.
Yeah, it's inevitable.
Again, we go back to perception. No matter, it's how they perceive something, how you perceive something, and that gap there that creates a lot of the issues, right?
Mm-hmm.
I always said that, you know what, I will feel like I have been a successful parent if my kids' problems are not the problems that I had. If
Yeah.
if if I corrected, if I was able to change and make the improvement to where I was messed up, they're still going to have problems. They are. I mean, it is. That's why we have a therapy fund, right? It's just there. But as long as they don't repeat the problems that I have, then I guess I'm successful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if my
I like
son,
that perspective.
thank you.
And if your son what?
I know.
I was going to go. You don't want to go there.
I kind of heard that too, Sarah. And I'm like,
I was hoping that we could just I was like, I'm not going back there.
That's funny.
Yeah, that is important for parents to hear, though, that some of these things that kids will grow up and have issues with later, or I don't know, struggle with, anything that's attributable to the parents. Is that the right word? Attributable? Sounded weird coming out of me.
Attributed
To the parents. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It is based on the kid's perception too, right? And where they are in the moment and how you interpret things. And yeah, that's a whole other podcast.
I also think that if you're worried that you're not doing a good job as a parent, or you're worried that you're not a good parent, then that in itself tells me that you are a good parent, because that means that you are self-reflecting and you are thinking about your job as the parent. If you think you're just crushing it and you are a perfect parent, then that is an issue, because then you're not reflecting on your own stuff. But like, if you're worried that you're not doing a good job as a parent, then just the fact that you're worried about that tells me that like you're doing an okay job.
Oh, that's great.
Well, I worry so much. I must be an excellent parent then.
We all worry.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
We do.
It's hard not to.
Emmy had a good question earlier that I want to make sure that we don't forget to ask. How has being a therapist shaped you as being a parent and how you manage your kids?
That's a really good question.
I know. That's why I didn't want to forget it. And I wanted to give Emmy the kudos for that one. Because
So to be fair, I'm also the child of a therapist. So I have a lot. Yeah.
It's a therapist sandwich.
Yeah, no kidding.
It's a therapist sandwich. I think it depends on the day. Honestly, there have been times when there's things coming out of my mouth, and as I'm saying them, I'm like, I have actively told parents not to say this to their kids, and yet it is still coming out of my mouth. I think it has given me a better ability to empathize with my kids and to give them some space. I think I'm an inherently a pretty patient person. So I think being a therapist has given me, it just helped me know and have the tools to help them in those really hard moments, or to not like totally lose my shit, like when they're not listening. I still do that sometimes, but it has given me the ability to regulate myself in order to help them regulate themselves, right? Because if we're all dysregulated, then everyone's yelling and nothing's being productive. But I think being a therapist has definitely helped me when they're having those really hard moments. Also, just understanding developmentally where kids are at has been like just having that kind of knowledge. And I think that's the biggest thing, is just like knowing how to help them calm down when they're feeling upset, and knowing how like there are certain things that just no matter what are not going to work. And it's not because it's not going to work with that one kid of mine. It's because it just is not going to work in general. Right. Like,
Yeah.
if you're trying to reason with with someone who's in the middle of having a tantrum, or who's really, really upset, if you know that because they're working from this part of their brain, not this part of their brain, right? They can't access their prefrontal cortex right here. And this is where our reason belongs. If they're
the front
of your brain. So when you're upset and you're in fight or flight, it's that most basic part of your brain that's activated. And when that part of your brain is activated, nothing else in your brain works, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're trying to negotiate with a toddler or a 6-year-old who's having a massive meltdown, they can't hear it. Their brain is not working in a way that allows them to hear whatever you're trying to reason them with. So your best bet, and I try to do this as much as I can, but your best bet as a parent is to like help them calm down, and then you can have that conversation, right? Then you can help them understand. Or even if your spouse, when you and your spouse are yelling at each other, you can't reason with one another because your brains can't access that part of your brain where you use reason. Those are the things that have helped me, I think, the most as a parent.
Well, that's no fair because you have more tools in your tool belt. What are some other examples of tools that you would use to calm your child? Or let's just say, because so many people have kids that are very anxious. I think anxiety, as you even said, is like so wildly common. So, what are a couple of tools that you could share with other people that would be helpful for those situations?
Yeah. So one of the ways that I really like to practice is from like an experiential perspective. And so when a kid is feeling anxious, I like to help them, or not necessarily in that moment, but like if you're a parent, you have a kid who has a lot of anxiety. A good thing to ask them is like, when you're anxious, where do you feel it in your body? Do you feel it in your stomach? Do you feel it in your chest? What are the signs? Because our bodies give us signals that we are starting to get anxious, for example, before we maybe really recognize that, right? So if you notice that your heart is starting to beat faster when you're starting to get anxious, okay, so what are some things that we can do? We can take deep breaths. We can move our bodies. I would say I would have a parent talk to their kid about what are they physically feeling when they're feeling anxious, and then what are the tools? Taking deep breaths, taking a break, you know, going to a different room, getting a drink of water, counting to 10. If you have a kid who is having, like, they're just in a major panic attack, a really good grounding exercise is, you can do it a few different ways, but you can say, okay, tell me 5 things that you can see in this room. Okay.
Mm,
I can see the pens on the desk. I can see the computer. I can see the light, whatever. What are 5 things that you can hear? What are 5 things that you can feel? I can feel my sweater on my body. I can feel my legs, my feet on the floor. And just kind of bringing them back into the present moment can help diffuse some of that anxiety. And I would tell parents to never like say, "Oh, you're fine. You're being silly. There's no reason to be worried about that." That's never going to happen because to your kid, that is a real thing. Like they are really, really worried about that. But trying to reason with them in that moment is not going to work. So you got to kind of get them to a point where and sometimes you don't have that conversation even till the next day. I like to tell parents car rides are the best time to get to talk to your kids because they are literally trapped. You are in a moving vehicle and you cannot get out. So that is the best time you have a captive audience to have those conversations. Like if you guys got in a fight the night before, once everyone's settled down and cooled off, that a car is a great time to have a conversation with your kid.
yeah, I agree. And I heard the car is a great place for those conversations because you're side by side and not making eye contact.
Yeah, I heard that too.
And they kind of like that better. Is that right? It's more comfortable.
Well, it's not confrontational either,
Not
right?
yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And with anxiety too, I mean, anxiety can be really tricky and it can pop up at really, what seems to us is like the drop of a hat, or like all of a sudden your kid is having a panic attack. And honestly, like I think that if your child is really having a lot of anxiety struggles, and you need to get them into a therapist who can help you with that, because I think parents oftentimes they try with best intentions to help their kids out, and they don't have. I can talk about all the tools right now, but until you can really figure out what is triggering that anxiety, all those tools are only going to do so much to help really with that anxiety, because sometimes you have to dig a little deeper to figure it out, to figure out what's going on. And let your kids, I'll send you the link to the article. There's a New York Times article that my sister had sent me that I was talking about earlier. A lot of this anxiety is because so parents are so overprotective of their kids. We don't let kids do what we used to do. I don't know about you guys, but when I was a kid in the summertime, we would come home from swim team in the morning and we would get on our bikes and we would go, and we would maybe come home at lunchtime or maybe not. And then we would come home at dinner time and we would have had a full day, and like our parents didn't know where we were, and that was okay. And
Right.
now we don't let our kids do that for a whole host of reasons. But the article that I read really was talking about like, Yeah, letting your kids do those things. Let your kids go run an errand for you. Like, give your kids that a little bit more freedom, and some of that anxiety might go away.
Yeah, I've read a lot about that too. I think there's a lot of validity there, no doubt.
Yeah.
Do you think anxiety stems or starts as a thought processes?
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes it's triggered by an event and sometimes it does. And sometimes apples and trees. I've had a lot of kids come in, parents bring their kids in with a lot of anxiety. And then after you kind of talk with the parents, you're like, okay, well, now I'm getting where your kid is getting their anxiety because you are a ball of anxiety. And so sometimes it's not even the kid necessarily. It's not that the kids don't have anxiety, but it's a learned behavior almost where, or they're like hearing these things from their parents, where the parent has a lot of anxiety. And so that the kids then kind of absorb all that anxiety too.
Is it ever an issue with just chemicals where there is no triggering effect?
100%. That I was just about to say that. Sometimes it is just a chemical, like there is just brain chemistry.
Yeah. Because my daughter will sometimes be very, very anxious. And in the beginning, I used to say, well, why are you feeling this way or whatever? And she would, and we got to the point where she would be like, Mom, it makes no sense. I don't know why I'm anxious. There is no reason for me to be
Yeah.
anxious.
Yeah. And then and so did you get her on meds?
She can't take medication. I won't get into the whole deal with her, but she has a lot of issues with the medication. So it's been a lot of hard work on her part to recognize it.
I was gonna say, I can imagine. And then a lot of hard work to like build that skill set and those tools in her toolbox to deal with that anxiety.
Absolutely. Yeah.
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 And I'm guessing that, I mean, she's probably like in sophomore in college now?
Freshman
in college. Right. So like she's aware enough of like what's going on in her body that she can tell when she's starting to get anxious and she
Absolutely.
can use those tools. And parents, I am never one to like push meds ever. A, I'm not a psychiatrist, but B, like we over medicate as a general overall. I think our society is quite over medicated, but sometimes, Andrea, to your point, it really is just brain chemistry.
Yeah. And I was just going to say on the whole medication thing, she's been on 15 different medications. We just can't find one that's going to work for her. And it's tough, but getting to know your body and the signs has been, I mean, she is so in tune with her body.
Yeah.
So, but it's interesting because, and now I'm getting off on a personal thing and I don't like to do this, but I'm going to bring it up anyways because I think it brings up a good point. She wasn't diagnosed with anxiety until she was 8 or 9. And I look back now, she was doing self-soothing measures well before then. When she was at a party, that we were at a party, all of a sudden we couldn't find her and she would be hiding behind the couch because it was too overstimulating and she was trying to protect herself or what, that's just one example of things that she used to do. She always used to pull herself away. And I look back now and I say, she was recognizing that she was uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I would wonder if we could all look back on our kids to start seeing, okay, what kind of things are they doing to help, for self-preservation?
Yeah, that's such a good point. I'm gonna be thinking about that with my own kids. Like, what do they do? What am I not seeing? My daughter's a thumb sucker, and my pediatrician. I mean, this was a lot. Like, I mean, she was probably 2 or 3. He was like, "Listen, like, if that's her coping mechanism at this point, like, why take that away?"
I agree.
And I was like, God, you're so right. Like, she's not going to go to college sucking her thumb. And if she is, well, then oh well. But like, we'll deal with that then. But like, of my two, she is way better at re-regulating herself and always has been. Whereas my son never took a pacifier, never sucked his thumb, and has always really had a hard time with re-regulating himself.
That's interesting.
It's really, yeah, it is very interesting. And so, yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I don't think we look at that because there's also the social norm, right? Of like, oh my God, like my daughter's being so rude. Like she's hiding behind a couch. She's at this party. Like, what is going on with her? And we're not taking that step back and being like, oh, like, why is that?
Right. She needs to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The whole sucking the thumb and the pacifier thing, both my daughter sucked her fingers, my son sucked his thumb. But I remember that was like a big deal. Oh, well, when are you going to take? And I was like, well, gosh, I don't know. I was the same as you. Like, well, he's not going to go to college sucking his thumb, at least. And if he does, well, that's weird. I guess I messed up. But it was, that was a way for them to calm themselves down. And it's why take it away? Whether they carry their blankie, for years to come. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. My kids wear the blankie.
Yeah. She has a little hippo. So she has this little lovey that's hippo that, we've almost lost 10 million times. And she really only sucks her thumb when she has the hippo ever. And so when she went to kindergarten, hippo was not allowed to go to school with her anymore, and that was a whole big transition. And they had pajama day yesterday, and my son, they were allowed, all the kids were allowed to take a small lovey, to school with them. And she was like, guess who I'm going to take? And they were talking about it. And Levi was like, oh, are you taking hippo? And she was like, no, because then I would suck my thumb.
Oh, see? And she's aware.
She knows.
She's 100% aware. Yeah. She knows.
Good for her.
Yeah. So we're trying to get her to the point where it's not like a boredom thing. It's if you need to suck your thumb, go do it in your room. You can have hippo. You can suck your thumb there. You don't need to be sucking your thumb in the car because you're bored.
Right.
But also it is her self-soothing. It's her coping.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Oh, I love the fact that she was so aware that she said, well, no, then I'll suck my thumb.
Yeah, she totally knows.
She's got self-awareness.
I was going to say, I think as parents, if we were less focused on directing our kids and making sure they fit in boxes, that they would thrive so much better, because they really do. We don't give them enough credit, I don't think.
Mm-hmm.
They really do know themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, we do have to put boundaries in place. I'm not taking that away, but you know what I mean? Expectations, yeah.
I struggle with that. I do, honestly. Especially clothing. I'm not super strict about it, but for a long time, I wouldn't let my son wear sweats to school because I was like, sweats are not learning clothes. And I'm not going to let you go to school looking like a slob. And even now, he'll tuck, if he has a shirt that's too long, he'll try tucking it into his pants. I'm like, you can't, I'm sorry, I can't let you leave the house looking like that. You need to tuck your shirt. So I need to be better about just letting him go out in the world however he wants to look.
You know what I love about Seren, or you, Seren, not just because you are here, I'm not trying, is the fact that you're so real. And I think that as parents, we think that therapists are going to judge us, or that they sit on this, on this throne of I do no wrong. And you are just sharing that, yes, I may be a therapist, but you know what? I'm still a person. I'm still a parent. And it's okay to talk to me. It's like when you run into your hairdresser at the grocery store and your hair's all matted in the nest and you're like, oh my God. Yeah. And you're like, okay. But see, you're a real person and you're so authentic with it. So thank you for being that way.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I try.
No, you're not trying. You're just being you, which is so beautiful.
What I was going to say, I really, it took me a lot of therapy to just kind of get to the point where I'm just this is, too much work to try to be something that you're not.
Oh, 100%.
Seren, I think therapy and age, really.
Very true. But also, I can't expect my clients to be authentic if I'm not being authentic.
Good point.
Yeah. Great point.
Yeah. You give people so many tools in this conversation and definitely insight. But yeah, I'm with Andrea. I think the authenticity and the ability to just be imperfect and work with what you got and continue to stay open to possibility is awesome.
Thank you.
And really, what a great example for the kids too, right? Is it?
I hope so.
I wish we had this conversation before. I want to do it over again. I mean, I don't, but I kind of do.
You want to do a parenting over? I know.
Yeah.
The things we learn.
I could do better.
No, but you're doing great. Remember
you're doing amazing. You have 3 beautiful kids.
Thank you. Yeah. I just look back and look at the mistakes, but I just have to let that go.
Oh,
yeah.
So to this day, my son refuses to sleep with his door shut, or really, it's not, as he's becoming more of a tween, it's not as big of a thing. But like when he was a toddler, he would have these just like insane tantrums, like so intense. And the door to his room didn't have a lock on the outside. And so what we would do is we would tie it to the bathroom across the hall so that he couldn't open the door and get out. Because I mean, he needed to like re-regulate in his room. And it was clearly so traumatizing to him, because then forever he like wouldn't sleep with his door closed. Like if we put him in his room, like, don't close the door. At one point I was like, oh shit, like we really did a number on him.
Good thing I'm a therapist.
Yeah, exactly.
That makes me feel better.
But like, I mean, in the moment, we didn't know what else to do. Like, yeah. I think our whole thing, my husband and I, like when we like go to conferences for our kids, like academics, yes, academics are important, but at the end of the day, we care that they're good people. So,
Yeah.
you know, I think if you're raising a good person and your kids are good people, then I think you've done a pretty good job. All the other stuff will fall into place.
You know what would be a really fun podcast is to have people share, although I guess you could get really, but like all the stuff that they actually did wrong. Like I gave my son baking soda once because he had said something and I was like, well, I'm not going to wash your mouth out with soap. I'm going to do it with baking soda. And then
how did that go?
It could be a long.
That's good for brushing your teeth.
Yeah.
Well, let's just say he came up afterwards and he started telling me that he was having his heart hurt. And I thought, so then I get on the internet and I read that, oh yeah, baking soda in large amounts can actually cause heart problems. So I had to call poison control.
Oh.
The poison control lady was laughing at me, telling me, I think his heart hurts because he's sad that he hurt your feelings, not that you're killing your son. But that would be a fun one, right?
That would be a good one.
that would be a really
like what you did, right? You're like, you're trying to keep him safe. Well, his perception was he was never going to get out of there.
Right.
And, you know, you were trying to do the right thing. So.
Oh my God, that is so funny. The baking soda. That is amazing.
Yeah, it wasn't funny at the time because I was sweating bullets. Talk about anxiety at that point. I'm like, oh my God, I killed him.
Oh, yeah. How am I going to explain this to my husband when he gets home?
It's so funny because the lady said to me, well, what's the size of the spoon? And I'm like, I don't know, just like a teaspoon. It was just a spoon like that you get out of your. And so then I had to run downstairs and I was freaking out. And my husband says, what's the matter? I'm like, nothing is the matter.
Yeah.
And all she was trying to determine was like, did I have a ladle? Or did I just have a teaspoon?
Right. And then did she tell you like how much he actually would have had to have like consumed for it to be an issue?
Well, let's just say it is a lot more than a spoon, probably even more than a ladle. But
yeah.
It would have to be because my grandma used to make us brush our teeth with baking soda.
Well, that's why I thought. I was like, oh, it's just going to be yucky, right? It's just going to feel yucky on your teeth. And then I was like, oh gosh,
it's disgusting.
And then you were like, well, I should have just gone with the soap.
That was it. At least soap I knew was safe. You know, and that was it. I was like, oh, okay, there's a bunch of, perfumes in soap. And I mean, how do I know that it's not natural?
I mean, listen, mothers who were pregnant used to smoke and drink during their pregnancy. So like, I think like,
exactly.
You're okay.
Yeah.
I remember.
We won't call it CPS.
Yeah. I remember back in the 90s seeing an interview with Michelle Pfeiffer. Do you know Michelle Pfeiffer, Seren?
Yeah.
Okay. And she was interviewed and she said, I just want to make sure I make enough money to pay for my kids' therapy. That was her measurement.
I've heard that she said that. Yeah. I've heard that she said that before.
Yeah. Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah. Hence the reason Seren got into therapy. She's like, Michelle Pfeiffer is paying the bill. I'm going.
Totally right.
Oh,
yeah,
awesome.
but community mental health does not pay like that.
But it's necessary. It is so necessary. Yeah,
I really enjoy I enjoy my job. I really do.
Well, Seren, thank you so much. This has been a really fun conversation with you, and you had so many good nuggets of information for parents and even myself. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure. I had a lot of fun.
Thank you so much. We'll love to have you on again.
I would love that.
Absolutely. Thanks, Seren.
Yeah, thanks.
Hi, my name is Tracy Slepcevic, and I'm the best-selling author of Warrior Mom, A Mother's Journey in Healing Her Son with Autism. You can find my book, warriormom.org, and we have an upcoming event called Autism Health Summit, in which we will have some of the top doctors discussing how to address underlying biological issues that are plaguing our kids these days and how to address them. And you can go to autismhealth.com if you would like to buy tickets, and you can use the promo code AHS50 to get $50 off. And we hope to see you in San Antonio.
Thank you for tuning in to today's conversation. To join our community and access more valuable resources, please visit our website at thiswayuppodcast.com.
Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and share this with a friend. And to stay connected, follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Listen to This Way Up.